let's start with they call it the joint session, right? The speech to the joint session, Donald Trump last night. It's basically State of Union.
Yes,
Some people saying it's more like a
yes.
campaign speech. What do you think? What are the things that stand out?
It was a campaign speech and it was a State of the Union speech, and it was both at the same time. It was actually, in some ways, a very interesting speech because it set out very clearly where Donald Trump's personal priorities are. And they were interesting. And again, with Donald Trump, you have to separate a lot of the language and the self-praise and the bragging and the boasting, which is, I mean, a lot of people find it very annoying, and perhaps in some respects it is annoying. But you have to look beyond that and actually look at uh, what was interesting for me was the weight, where the weight of the speech fell, and it fell overwhelmingly on domestic
Yeah,
issues.
yeah.
And you got a very clear conception of where it is, I think, that Donald Trump, his vision, if you like, of the kind of America he wants to create. I'm not saying it's an achievable vision at all, by the way, but anyway, he basically wants to return to an idealized picture of 19th century, late 19th century America, but with booming technology. he wants the
Yeah.
technology, and he wants the social and structures and the economic structures of late 19th century American. He seems to have persuaded himself that this is the best and most optimal time in American history. But about foreign policy, he said very little.
Mhm.
And there were two things that really stood out for me. About China,
Yeah.
he said virtually nothing.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
again, very interesting
Mhm.
very interesting contrast with Joe Biden. I mean, you remember Joe Biden
Mhm.
going into Congress, being very rude about China, being very rude about Xi Jinping. I mean, appallingly rude about Xi
Yeah.
Jinping. We got nothing like that from Trump yesterday, and that really is a refreshing change and a positive sign.
Mhm.
He didn't say anything about Iran either, I noticed, which is the other sort of bugbear country
Mhm.
for his supporters. But he didn't. I don't think he mentioned Iran. He mentioned the Middle East, but he
Mhm.
was very measured about foreign policy. He said a little about Ukraine and Russia, though not very much. Whereas it was
Mhm.
overwhelmingly focused on this wonderful world that America once had and which he wants to recreate. In his the way he presents it, it's a great vision for America's future. But I don't think many people notice that it's also very much a world of an idealized past, but an idealized past brought in some ways up to date. It's a strange mixture of romantic history and science fiction. Just if I can put it that way.
It, it's interesting because it is a long speech. They were saying that it's
Oh
probably the
God,
longest in modern history, one and a half, more than 1.5
yeah,
hour. So it's a long speech, but
yeah.
like you said, that there is very little mentioned in, foreign policy. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
one thing, I mean, one thing I have to say, wherever Trump appears, there's always drama, right? They removed
Yes.
one of the congressperson, right? The Al Green, who was rude, but he's not the only one. I mean, previously there were,
Yeah.
there's always somebody who will stand out and talk and loudly and very rude, but they were never removed. But he was removed, so that was kind of interesting. And then,
Oh,
oh,
absolutely. Performance, always performances, always theatre with Trump. I mean, you remember there was the time in the first term when Nancy Pelosi ripped up,
mhm,
what was it,
yeah,
his speech behind him and things of that kind. Um, to my mind, it works to his advantage. All of this theatre ultimately projects the interest back on him, which is, of course, where you want it to be. It's strange that people don't understand that. But anyway, I interrupted you.
no, no, it's just the reaction from the Democrats is always interesting because they didn't
Mm,
applaud with Republican at all. Seems like even
mm,
with George W. Bush. who lied to the world about the WMD, get the United States into the war. Even with him, lots of times the the Democrats would, they would have stood up and applauded. But their hatred towards Trump, it just seems like nothing. We have seen nothing, this kind of a hatred towards Trump. It's stunning to me. I mean, I still kind of quite understand, but that's when I see it, it always reminds me that how much they hate Trump, right?
You're absolutely correct about this. You want to criticize Trump? Do so. There is a huge amount to criticize. I do so. We do so. Lots of things to say. I mean, I've just made criticisms of him. I've said that his image is a mixture of romantic and science fiction mixed up together. I mean, that's what I think of his speech. But hate him? Yeah. I mean, it is absolutely disastrous, and it's eating them up. It's making it impossible for them to oppose him effectively, because their emotions, their visceral feelings, are constantly getting in the way.
Yeah. Okay. The very little he talked about Mexico, China, Canada is about tariff, right? So the tariff he put in place started, I think, on Monday, which really scared the stock market. So the stock market has gone down for a couple of days, pretty significantly, mainly because of that. I think the latest that the Commerce or the Treasurer was saying that they can meet these countries halfway. Somewhere I read that. So the reason I think the market reacted so strongly is that everybody thought he was just saying that, using this as a negotiation tactic. But now it turns out that he actually would go through with it. That scared the market, but he can continue to use it as a negotiation tactic. So do you think this will be it, or are they going to continue, maybe pull back a little bit with the tariffs?
Yeah, I think they probably will pull back, and I think we will have negotiations and all kinds of things done. But I think with Donald Trump, we have to accept one fundamental reality, which is that he has convinced himself that tariffs are a great thing and that this is the way forward for America. Whilst I was trying to get the text of Trump's latest speech, the internet threw up for me the speech he delivered to Congress in, I think it was March 2017. It was very interesting to compare the two, because he was already talking about tariffs then. He was quoting Lincoln about how important tariffs are. Of course, Lincoln lived in a completely different time, the 1860s and all this. But Trump is one of those people who gets a few ideas and they stick in his mind, and he just won't let them go. And he's persuaded himself that tariffs are, the magic cure for America's economic problems. And even if he negotiates and he gives here and he changes things there, ultimately he'll always come back to them, because, as I said, that's his solution. That's what he believes is going to transform America in the way that he wants to transform it. So yes, I think there is room for deals. But remember 30 days ago when he first slapped tariffs on Mexico and Canada, he then called them off after about a day, said, that they had 30 days in which to sort things out. The 30 days passed, and here we are. We're back with the tariffs. So he's always going to do this in the end. And I think we've got to be ready for this. And I think China, which has obviously got a very good interest in American tariff policy, needs to think and be prepared for that too. The other thing I would say about tariffs is that there's this big question of their ultimate legality, because tariffs are a revenue-raising measure, and there's a strong legal argument that you can't just impose them by executive order in the way that Trump is doing. You need authority from Congress to do it. Now, if you watch the scenes in Congress yesterday, one of the things that came across to me absolutely clearly is that the Republican Party are going to do whatever Trump wants them to do. I mean, they were standing up and cheering and applauding him. And for the moment, at least, he has complete control of his party. I think that at some level they're even scared of him. I mean, I suspect, that they worry that if he goes against them, individual senators or representatives, they stand little chance of getting re-elected. So at some point, there is a real possibility that these tariffs are going to be converted into law as a result of legislation, because the Republicans have majorities in both houses and they seem to support him on this. So again, I think that's something that China needs to think about, and not obviously just China, but every country. Germany ought to be thinking about it too, by the way. Not that they are, but that's another story.
Yeah, he also mentioned that April 3rd, he said it's going to be reciprocal tariff with other countries, which many believe he's referring to Europe. So Europe is next, I guess. So
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you're talking about tariff the legality. Some people are believing that the whole idea for him to do it is to undermine the Congress, because the Congress are in control of the tax revenue. Tariffs are separate. Some people interpret not necessarily that the Congress need to ratify some kind of a thing, but the Congress simply cannot control tariffs. So in that sense, if let's say he continued to raise tariffs and to the degree that that he can have a lot of money at his disposal, he even doesn't need Congress as much as because getting money from Congress is through tax dollars, then he can even ask it for, tax cut for the people. There's some people thinking that was his intention. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting, and I'm aware of that argument, and I can understand. I can see where it's coming from. If you read the text of the U.S. Constitution, I can see how that case can be made. I am not myself persuaded by it, but I accept that is that case. Again, I think that I think that there is a lot of force to this argument that Trump had a lot of trouble with Congress in his first term, as all presidents do, but he did especially so because all those investigations were conducted against him. And if he can bypass Congress in any way he can, he will. And if he's persuaded himself that he can raise money to keep the government running without Congress, and he can do it through taxes, undoubtedly that is a strong incentive for him. But I come back to what I was saying. Even in, I think, March 2017, he was talking about tariffs. He was talking about tariffs even before he became president. So I don't think that is the whole reason or the only reason. And one of the reasons I say that people need to be wary of Trump getting Congress to enact laws about tariffs is that if you know anything about the American political system, if laws like that are passed, it's an absolute nightmare to get them repealed. You find it's particularly difficult because you get all kinds of special interests then start to benefit from the fact that they're tariffs. And these tariffs could then start to become permanent. It's not like it was with the Second World War and Bretton Woods and all of that, when doing away with tariffs was a popular and easy thing to do because it happened on the back of a victorious war, and at a time when the United States was indisputably the world's biggest economy. Today, the mood is very different, and if the Americans commit to this, position, to this course, it may be very, very difficult to get them to change their minds.